Good afternoon. So today this is gonna be the first video for the Prinz Albrecht Palais history in a more all-inclusive format, and we're gonna go through some stuff which is or has not been published on the internet, and I wouldn't say it's secretive. It has just been not part of any publications like on Wikipedia. And this is going to be a two-part or three-part with this video series. We're going to talk about in one video the time from like 1920 until the end of 1945, and then the time from 1732 on 1720 until 1920, in that time period. And I was waiting for this book here, which is in German, Schriften des Vereins für die Geschichte der Stadt Berlin, erster Band. This is a collection of 5 booklets a civic organization or a club back then in Berlin wrote, and these different booklets were bound together in a book. So you have the first volume, second volume, or first booklet, second booklet, third booklet, fourth booklet, and the sixth booklet in this volume, book number 1. And it is basically the club for the history of the city of Berlin. And they were all written between these booklets between 1860 and 1872, and they were basically published as a booklet, probably to the members and any person who may had an interest in it obtaining this booklet, and later on then published in this here. This book, the last one which we had coming in here, is from 1872. So I would say that this book was probably printed in 1873, 1875, somewhere around there. And that makes this book here 150 years old. And the previous owner had put these marks in here for the different chapters. And they have a entire chapter, which is chapter or the booklet number 3, was dedicated to the Prinz Albrecht Palais. And that has some interesting stories and details in it, over 60 pages. Besides of the history of the city itself, it basically starts here. This booklet number 3 was printed or published in 1870. This is this here. Let me show you this as good as we can see it. And here's two things, and this is where I would like to start, basically using this video here, our first video, as a preface, you know, as a introductory to this whole thing. Because when you read these old books, for one is they were written in Fraktur, which most people can no longer read. I learned it when I was 7 years old from my grandparents. And my grandparents gave me 2 gifts. It wasn't money. They gave me the ability to read Fraktur, and they gave me the ability to locate historical writings and how to work through archives, our family archives, as far as they're still existing, and then archives in general. And the interesting part about this here is that, especially in the chapter about the Prinz Albrecht Palais, the one we want to focus on, is that the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan of the Empire, sent an envoy to Berlin. And I think this was during the time of Frederick the Great, which must have been around, I have to look this up now, 1770, 1775, somewhere around there. Yeah. Ahmed Effendi That was the name of the Turkish envoy, or the Ottoman Empire envoy, was Turkish. They call it the Turkey envoy Ahmet Effendi, Effendi, and he was in Berlin from the latter part of 1764 until the spring of 1765, and he stayed in the Palais before it ever became the Prinz Albrecht Palais. And that is part of the story. And the interesting thing is this, and for this we need to go a little bit further, already to 1925, was that the author, who was not Jewish, used a Yiddish word in here to describe Muslims. We say today Muslims. And back then they were called Muselmann, Muselmann. That's the German word, or the Yiddish word, for Muslim. It was not derogatory. This was just how we referred today to Muslims as Muslims. They referred to that, and they used the Yiddish word for that, Muselmann. Adolf Hitler's book, this is just background information, Mein Kampf, was written and published, or was published in Fraktur as well, because that was the common way in Germany, first in Prussia, and in every German language speaking state, everything was published in Fraktur. And as we know, is that so was Mein Kampf. And Adolf Hitler wrote in Mein Kampf, which I have read, that he wanted to abolish Fraktur and go to print. That happened and materialized in Germany. Then after the war, after 1945, in both East and West Germany and in Austria, all of the German-speaking countries then went away from Fraktur, no longer taught Fraktur, and that was like the big opening ceremony for this process to start, was the book burning in Berlin in May 10th, 1933. That's where they were getting rid of it. And they wanted to get rid of all the traces of Yiddish language, like Muselmann, Mushugana, and that sort of stuff, which was deeply embedded at that point until 1933 in the German language. And they were trying to get rid of this. They were basically trying to clean up the language and the history and remove any traces of Jewish life out of our language, out of the German language. So in these old books from that time, from the 17th, 18th, 19th century, we will find more often than not Yiddish words in here. That means they came from the Jewish community in Germany, Austria, Poland, and out of other areas, and they were embedded in our language, and it was non-offensive. Today, when you look up Muselmann, for instance, because that is a term they're using in here, which I will be using too in the next video when we get to this book, and we talk about Ahmet Effendi, his time at the Palais. He spent there 6 months, he lived in it. It's very interesting, but we will also then utilize the Yiddish language in here. And I find it sad today, when you Google Muselmann, you will find in Germany at least a reference to it, and say that it is originated out of the Yiddish language and it is derogatory. At that point in 1870, when the author wrote that volume 3 of that booklet about the Prinz Albrecht Palais, that word was not derogatory. The Jewish people were not, anti-Muslim as it is today, and the Muslim world was not as anti-Jewish or anti-Semitic as what we find today. That was a different time during the Ottoman Empire. What I also found very interesting is the author lists all the presents Ahmed Effendi brought with him as a gift to Frederick the Great. And the list is pretty extensive. He not only wrote the items on there, multiple items of a particular type like Persian carpets, but also where they were manufactured. And because Syria was part of the Ottoman Empire at that time, we have a lot of references there to say like cities like Aleppo and other parts there, and to a certain extent Palestine, and I'm amazed when you see the riches this region in the Middle East had at that point, especially in Syria, Aleppo, of the merchandise which was manufactured there, with gold and ceramics and these kind of things of what they did and what they brought with them. This was a very prosperous area, especially that area around Syria, Aleppo, and then Yan Kunis in Palestine. These were very rich cities, rich in terms of their craftsmanship, the capabilities, and the materials, the raw materials used, from finest silk to gold to silver to bronze. There was there's a lot to this when we're looking at this, and we're looking at the Middle East today. Of when you look at these pictures and what comes out of there, especially Syria now, on how devastated these cities are and how everything has been run into the ground. This is just the final conclusion, what we have seen now with, with that guy who left it. What was his name now? Wasn't Hussein, Saddam Hussein? No, that was the Iraqi guy. The Syrian leader who left now for Russia. He ran that country, unfortunately, really into the ground, and I hope that these people can rebuild their country and get back to the greatness they once had over there. And this is written now with Jewish language in a non-derogatory form. It was explained to the people here, of how wealthy the Middle East actually was before oil ever came into the picture. And the entire mysticism around the Muslim world, with their multiple marriages and that sort of stuff, and the harems, and that was looked upon as elegant. And we will read this, we will see this in this book, and the class in itself it had, and the way even Christian people looked at Muslim people coming from the Ottoman Empire out of that region. That is a very interesting aspect which we have to put in there. One more thing I would like to say about Mein Kampf and Adolf Hitler is that the publication Mein Kampf is actually prohibited to be owned in Germany. I believe it is prohibited to, I don't know if you can own it or if there's just a distribution of it. But Mein Kampf was written also in Fraktur, the same as this book, because that was the language or the type of print style people could read back then. I wonder on how many people actually could read Mein Kampf today, because most people, I would say 99% of the population in Europe or in Germany, can no longer read Fraktur. It hasn't been taught in decades, at least 70 or 80 years or more in German schools. And you wouldn't know. The problem with Mein Kampf is that Adolf Hitler did not specify or spell out the final solution as it was then deliberated or decided on at the Wannsee Conference. And that poses a problem if you were to publish Mein Kampf today, is that the reader who is not familiar with the Holocaust or with the actual atrocities which happened, which cannot be denied because it did happen, but they can now say, well, Hitler was not part of the Wannsee Conference directly, so he was not the person who actually concocted the final solution, meaning the Holocaust in itself. And that would kind of whitewash Adolf Hitler, and it would open the whole thing up for this Holocaust denial, possibility, and say, well, Adolf Hitler was not part of this and he didn't know about the Jewish people being exterminated and that sort of stuff. That is a whole bunch of baloney, to say this at least. Hitler knew quite well, and it is apparent whether you read volume 1 of it, which he wrote in during his imprisonment 1924-25, or then the volume 2, which he wrote in 1927. That book is littered with anti-Semitism, and it is also clear in volume 1 he describes on how he became actually anti-Semitic in the early 20th century, before World War I already, when he got exposed to this. And it was during the time when he actually moved to Vienna that he actually picked up on this anti-Semitic sentiment, which was existence in the large city and that sort of stuff. So him not being aware of this is a pile of baloney. And this is kind of the outline. As I watched a video the other day, a documentary about the Hitler diaries, which were bought by the Stern magazine in Germany in 1982, which were written by Konrad Kujau. And Kujau was that guy who kind of copied Adolf Hitler's handwriting. And here too is he adopted the same theme from Mein Kampf, where Adolf Hitler basically didn't know about the final solution and the Wannsee Conference. So he kind of participated in that whitewash, and I believe, similar to what the people said in the documentary, is that this was basically an attempt by the Stern to help to reinstate Hitler as not a friend of the Jewish people, but a person who didn't know about the Holocaust. And there was then the possibility there that the Holocaust deniers can use this and say, here you see, Hitler never participated in this, he didn't know anything about this, so it never really happened. The reality is, for anyone who still has doubts about this, the Holocaust did happen in all its tragedy, in all its, how should I say this, horrific, dehumanizing activities and setup, and this whole thought process in there is just absolutely stunning that anyone could still doubt this. And I'm glad that some people were able to survive this whole thing, but this was a disgusting and totally despicable act from a humanitarian point of view. You cannot be easily comprehended. So I just wanted to say that because of the words or the phrases we will encounter in this book, which people say Muselmann, in this particular case here as an example, would be derogatory towards Muslim people. It was not, and I will show you on how they actually looked at this. The 1870s was the beginning of the underground anti-Semitic movement, which really took off around 1880, 1890 in the Austrian capital, Vienna, and in certain German cities. That's where that first originated. And these people here who wrote this in Berlin, the members of this civic club or organization, Verein für die Geschichte der Stadt Berlin, they were not anti-Semitic or anti-Muslim. They had respect for both religions and both groups. That is something we will see, that there was a completely different interaction between these three different religions throughout the time from 1732, when this book was built, when this Prinz Albrecht Palais was built, and the time when when Ahmed Effendi came there in 1764, and then it went on until 1870, the whole history in this. The Prinz Albrecht Palais was a commune for a while for artists. Very interesting, they published the letters here one communal member wrote, they were artists, musicians, painters, to the king, complaining about the other communal member, about spreading out, the other one playing the music too loud, he was playing the tuba, and that sort of stuff. That's what we will find in here. Napoleon occupied that building for a few months or a couple of years and used it as a field post office for his military. Then it was dormant. Frederick the Great's youngest sister lived in that building. She owned that for a while. Then it went to another family member. And eventually in 1830, my third great-grandfather got this basically as a gift from his father, who was still alive, the King Friedrich Wilhelm III, for his wedding to Marianne, the Princess of the Netherlands. And of course, in my other video, I called her father Alexander, but it was Wilhelm of the Netherlands, of course, who was her father and is one of my great-grandfathers also. And sometimes he gets so confused during this time. It was Wilhelm, it was Friedrich Wilhelm, Wilhelm, Friedrich, Heinrich, Friedrich, and Alexander. And then you had the, so this is kind of very difficult to keep track of it with all these names, the first, the second, the third, then it's the cousin, then it's the uncle. It's easier. Basically, we had Frederick the Great, that's easy to remember, and his father was Wilhelm der Dicke. That's what the people called him, because he was a little bit more, he liked to eat a lot of food, and it showed, so they call him Wilhelm the Fat Guy, basically. Fat Wilhelm, or Wilhelm der Dicke. That's what the people called him. But this is how I envisioned this. So the next video, I think I'm going to do going through the book, and then I will do it where we look at the pages. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of paintings or pictures of the Palais itself in existence, at least not that I've found publicly. I have some pictures from the 1920s and 1945 when the whole thing was basically in ruins. Otherwise, there's not much documented about the building, and that's why I wanted to make the video. But we have a lot of writing material, and I can reference out the archives where we can find this if someone was trying to find the original, references here, the reference material the author used. Let me just see who the author was, if they had written that down for the Prinz Albrecht Palais. This was Martinius. No, actually S. Schneider, Geheimer Hofrat. So Schneider was the author. That was one of the members of that history club who wrote this, and his position was Geheimer Hofrat. That was a title for a lower positioned civil servant within the administration of the king, basically. He wrote this, Schneider. And I think we're going to conclude our video here, and we will see you in the next video, maybe next weekend, maybe in a couple of weeks. I have to read some more and take some notes and see on how we're going to structure this, which stories are really interesting and which ones are not as interesting, and then I can tell you where you can find this book. It's very rare, very difficult to find, especially with all the different volumes in it. There are more of them which have only volume 1 and volume 2 of the booklets in it, and the Prinz Albrecht Palais was volume 3. It was the third booklet they published. It's called Heft 2. Heft 3 is, yeah, das ist Name, Heft 4, here we go. Heft 3. Das Palais seiner königlichen Hoheit des Prinzen Albrecht von Preußen, von L. Schneider, Leo, no idea what his first name was, L. Schneider, Mr. Schneider, Geheimer Hofrat. And that was printed Verlag der Königlichen Geheimen Oberhofbuchdruckerei, R. von Decker. So this will give you an idea. So it was published by the Royal Printing Office for the court of the King of Prussia in 1870. With that, you have a great afternoon, and we will see you.